Hello Year 7 and welcome to the first lesson of our new topic, the world of work. Today we're looking at the different types of jobs that can be found across the world. We're also going to see how these jobs are classified and why they fit into each classification. We're also going to look at the employment structure. What do you think that means? Have a think. That's right, the number of people in each job sector. Has it changed over time? What does it look like today? So I'd like you first of all to write the title and the key terms, and the key terms are disposable income, mechanisation, imports and exports. Press pause now. Now take half a page and I'd like you to copy the table with 4 columns. You're going to write these jobs into each column. We're going to group the different jobs based on similarities and differences. It's important though that you understand these are just examples. There are more jobs that fit into the columns. Do you have to think about how and why these jobs are grouped together? How are they similar? How are they different? Press pause to complete the table and think about this. So let's look at the answers. With the first column, I hope you picked out that the jobs are collecting raw materials, collecting things from the land. We call this the primary sector. With the second column, you hopefully identified jobs that are actually making things, turning primary goods into something of use, and we call this the secondary sector. The next column across are jobs which are doing a similar thing, even though they need different pay and qualifications, and these jobs are part of the tertiary sector. They take secondary goods and provide a service, maybe selling the secondary goods in shops or online. Finally, we have the fourth column of jobs, which are quaternary. High-tech and research and development. This is a growing sector in many developed and emerging economies. Press pause now to complete your table. Watch this video to help you understand the industry classifications. So the jobs are divided into 3 sectors: the primary, the secondary and the tertiary sector. We're going to understand these sectors by looking at milk. Milk is obtained from the farms where cows are milked by the farmer, and he directly obtains the milk from them. This is the primary sector. Then the milk goes to a factory, your industry, where it undergoes a series of treatments and it is bottled. This is the secondary sector. And then finally, these milk bottles are sent to the shop where they are sold and we can buy them. And this is the tertiary sector. So you can see this is why there are groups, and we have come up with some more important key terms for this lesson. So if we think about the jobs in the tertiary sector, particularly because of our lives and where we live and the people we know tend to work in this sector because we live in a developed country and we live in a city, London. The sector we are least likely to work in is the primary sector, and we're going to look at why this is. Now, I am sure you've come across the information I'm going to present to you on this slide, but I want you to think of the work you do in maths and science as a link because it makes it easier to understand them. I just want to introduce these different ways of representing data. So first we have a think, pie chart. That's right. These are circles with data represented in different size segments. The larger the segment, the higher the number of people represented. Next we have a bar graph. Well done. And this is used to show how total data is divided into parts. Now this is a very special bar graph. This is a divided bar graph. It's shown as a rectangle or bar and it's broken into sections. The proportion of the rectangle indicates the part of the whole that each graph amount represents. And finally we have a line graph. Excellent. And when the line goes down, that means the number of people is going down. So let's look at the figures of how employment structure has changed in the UK over time. So what sort of chart are we looking at here? That's right, well done, a pie chart. We can see that each pie chart has three segments. The proportion of people employed in the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary industry. We're going to ask ourselves the following questions for each pie chart. Are there more people working in the primary, which is blue, the secondary, which is orange, or the tertiary, which is grey? How many people are there? And what happens to the number of people in these employment sectors over time? We have three pie charts here, but I would really only like to focus on two, 1800 and the year 2000. So when I am describing change and I'm using pie charts, I want to do the following. I want to look to see if anything has increased over time. Hopefully, you've spotted that something has increased. Which employment structure has gone down over time or decreased? Can you use the figures to back up what you're saying? So hopefully you have spotted some answers. Press pause now to write your answers. So let's look at the answers. If I was describing the change, I would say the following. The tertiary industry, the grey area, has increased the most from 1800 to 2000. I might jump down and use some figures to back up what I'm saying. It was the least in 1800, but by the year 2000, it was employing 2/3 of the population. So it's now the largest sector in terms of employment. So which sector has decreased significantly since 1800? Well, if we look at the largest sector in 1800, 3/4 of the people were employed in the primary industry, but that has decreased significantly by the year 2000. So I can say that primary employment has decreased. At the same time that tertiary has increased, primary has decreased. Press pause now to check your answer. So this is an opportunity for you to describe the employment structure change by looking at some different data presented in do you remember what it's called? Well done, a divided bar graph. The divided bar graph shows us the percentage of people working in the primary, secondary, let's start here, sorry, primary, and we can see here the primary, the secondary industries, here, and the tertiary industry, here. The first thing to note is that the period of time is much shorter, between 1960 and 2010. However, the same rules apply. What I would like you to do is answer the question here. Using figure 2, describe how the employment structure of the UK has changed. What has increased? What has decreased? Use the data to support your response. Take some time and care because you are working with some different data. Press pause now to have a go. So what you have hopefully found out and written is as follows. Firstly, the tertiary industry has increased quite significantly from 1960 to 2010, and we can work out how much that has increased by. It's from about 58% of the population in 1960 and 42% of the population working in primary and secondary industries. How do we work that out? Well, if you have 42% here, and the tertiary sector goes all the way up to 100, we know that it is 58% of the population. But by 2010, the tertiary industry increased to 76% of the population. And if you look at that and follow the line across, you're looking at around 24% of the population employed in the primary and secondary industries. So the increase in the tertiary sector is 28%, and the decrease in the primary and secondary sector is 18%. Let's look now at the reasons why the employment structure has changed, not just in the UK, but in different countries, and link that to describe the different sectors of the economy and how it differs between the different countries and how it has changed over time. So on this slide, you can see the River Tyne, which runs from Newcastle in the northeast of the UK. Figure 3 shows the type of industry which were around on the River Tyne in 1981. We can see that it says that there was the launch of HMS Ark Royal, which is clearly a secondary industry, as it represents shipbuilding. But by 2016, this industry had been replaced by leisure cruises along the same stretch of river. Now, I don't want you to write anything for this slide, but I want you to think about why this has happened. Now, we know that there has been a change from primary and secondary industry in the UK towards tertiary industry over time. And you need to consider why this has happened. So let's look at what you're being asked here to do. I don't want you to write anything, and is that a second time? Using figures 3 and 4 and your own understanding that you have gained over this lesson, suggest reasons for this movement away from shipbuilding, secondary industry, to leisure cruises, tertiary industry. Now, I'm going to give you a little clue to help. Go back to the key words at the start of this lesson. They will really help you with this particular question. Press pause now to answer this question. Now, I'm going to talk you through why these changes are occurring. Again, I don't want you to write anything. At this point, you need to listen really carefully, as you're going to need to use this information in the next task and in the following lesson. So one of the reasons why we're seeing movement in the UK away from primary and secondary industries, in this case shipbuilding on the River Tyne, towards a tertiary industry, is because we can now import manufactured goods for relatively low cost, or rather cheaper than what it would cost to produce it here in the UK. And we import those from developing and emerging countries. And there's some examples here of China, India, and Turkey. Now, what did I mean by developing and emerging countries? I'd like you to think back to their GDP. Think back to the last unit. That's right, developing countries have lower GDP per capita than here in the UK. This means that in developing and emerging economies, people work for lower wages. Therefore, the cost of production for something like steel is lower, which means that the UK imports steel from China and India rather than make it here in the UK. So that's one of the reasons why some of the secondary industry and primary industries have closed. Hopefully, you've picked out the keyword mechanisation. And what we are seeing is that the number of machines that are now available to help manufacturing things has resulted in a decline in the number of people required to work in factories and manufacturing and in primary industries. The example in the images is cars, whereby people have been replaced by machines, and it's the same in the shipbuilding industry as well. Next, people have more disposable income today, and we know what disposable income is. Check your keyword. That's right, it's the money that people have left after they have paid all their bills. So if people have more money left, then they are likely to want to spend it. And so the number of services which are provided for people to enjoy themselves and to relax, for example tourism, have increased. And that is why the number of leisure cruises have increased. We can also see that as the disposable income has increased, so has the number of restaurants, coffee shops, cinemas, theatres, bowling alleys. Now, we're going to look at employment structure change in the UK, and you'll need half a page for this activity. What I would like you to do is create a table with the headings 1800, the year 1900, and the year 2000. We're going back to those pie charts we saw earlier, and I'd like you to sort the statements at the bottom of the page into the correct headings. Pause the video to complete the task. Now I would like you to try and answer these challenge questions. Press pause to complete. So let's mark your work against the correct responses. Let's go through some of these points. So in the year 1800, in the UK, the highest proportion of employment was in the primary industry. And the reason for this was that most of the work was done by hand. We didn't have ploughs, so humans had to plant the crops and collect the crops. It was similar if they worked in coal mines. In current times in 2019, we may find that many developing countries will have an employment structure similar to the UK in the year 1800. An example of this is the country Uganda, which we studied in development. However, we saw that as the UK moved into the 1900s and the mechanisation of the primary industry and the introduction of the plough, which meant that we needed less humans to work on farms, which led to them moving to urban areas, so cities like London and Manchester, to work in manufacturing. That's why the secondary industry here increased. Now, to answer the challenge question, we can see that today in newly emerging countries such as India and China, they have a similar employment structure. Many people employed in the secondary industry. So that's similar to the UK in the year 1900. So as we move into the 2000s and beyond, then this is where we see the UK's employment structure represent what it is today, with most people working in the tertiary sector. And that's because the high-tech machines are doing the work in the primary and secondary industries. So we don't need as many people to work there. People also have large disposable incomes. Now, what did that mean? That's right, they have money to spend after they've paid their bills. And they like to spend their money. So we have seen a growth in shops, entertainment, and leisure. So let's complete the challenge task. True or false? Many people believe that one of the factors which has led to an increase in the tertiary industry is that people are better educated, and because of this, people get better paid jobs. What do you think? It's not true. Although there are many well-paid jobs in the tertiary industry, there are also many low-paid jobs, for example in fast food outlets or shop assistants. You do not have to have significant qualifications to do these jobs. So it's really important that you understand that tertiary industry hasn't been driven by people being better educated and wanting better jobs. It's been driven by an increase in disposable income and other factors. This is our final way to present data. So here we have that's right, line graph, which is showing us the change in the primary industry in the UK from 1960 to 2015. This is an independent activity, so please complete the 3 questions at the bottom of the page and use figure 6 to answer the question. Let's read the questions. Question 1. What has happened to the number of people employed in primary industries? Can you include the general trend over time? Are there anomalies? What do we mean by anomalies? That's right, the data is different to what we would expect. Use the numbers and data to support your answer. Press pause now to answer these questions. So let's look at the answers. The trend has been to generally decrease from 1960 with 580,000 people to 2015 and about 360,000 people. The anomaly is from 1990 to 2010, and this is a link to offshore gas, which was extracted or taken out from the North Sea in Scotland and sold or exported abroad. Question 2. The machines take the jobs from humans. And for the challenge question, raw materials such as coal have run out, or it's too expensive to mine, and it's cheaper to import from abroad. Now let's check your understanding of the employment sectors by using these different figures. In your books, write 1 to 5, And then you can decide if the figure is primary, secondary, or tertiary. Press pause now. So here we have the correct answers. So figure 1 is fishing, which is collecting raw material, so that falls into the primary sector. Figure 2 is for car manufacturing, so the construction of cars, so that falls into the secondary sector. Figure 3 is telesales, which is where people phone up and sell products, like new TV or broadband packages. It's not quaternary because it's not high tech, it's a service industry. The oil rig is collecting oil, and oil is a raw material, so that falls into the primary sector. Finally, figure 5 is catering, providing a service for those people who are out for a meal, so therefore that's tertiary. So let's summarise the lesson. We learnt that there has been a decline in the primary and secondary industries and a growth in tertiary as more people have disposable incomes. That's the end of the lesson. Well done. See you next lesson.